Get lost! Go to hell! Get lost! Go to hell! It's over. Scum. Rest in peace.
Alright, so this is the Helix combo. The first setup of this combo is by Maker T. It's his Vergil combo 16. The second setup is by Byanyon Akuma. It's from one of his recent Twitter combos that he first sent me on Discord. And the final setup, which is the highlight of this combo, everything before this is basically filler, is by Melancholic Levy. Now, one thing worth noting is that Cad did something similar in one of his earlier combos, and I think that's what inspired him to make the Abyss combo. And if you remember in the Storm combo that we recently analyzed, the final setup was basically the final setup that Cad used in his Abyss combo. And the final setup of the Helix combo is very similar, if not crazier. So I think that a Levi or a Levy was inspired by Cad, but I should also note that there's another Chinese Vergil player called Connie Mio, who only has one video on YouTube, and, you know, I basically did the blood combo. It was kind of like inspired by him. But he's mostly active on Bilibili, and he also has these ideas, he also has these setups where he uses the spiral blades to send the enemy flying into the void/explosion glitch. So Levy's not the first one to come up with this, but it's just a coincidence. Like I said, basically the only reason this combo is even a thing is because of Levy's setup, or well, the last setup. The moment I saw it, the moment I laid eyes on it, I was like, wow, this is just so cool. I absolutely need to replicate this, but I needed 2 more setups to make it an actual combo, so I found these 2 setups, and I gotta say, I am incredibly eager to analyze this final setup, man. So, yeah, let's start the analysis. So you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, the one who is in sync with you and mimics all your commands immediately. And now you use Rising Star, which is right plus holding the attack button, but you use it before the Doppelganger has been fully formed. If you wait for the Doppelganger to be fully formed and then you use Rising Star, the Doppelganger will use Rising Star with you. You don't want that. You want to use Rising Star immediately while the Doppelganger is still a blur. We've been over this at least 1 trillion times. So anyway, now that you're done with Rising Star, you want to use Aerial Rave B. However, before you do Aerial Rave B, you press right plus attack button, okay? So why is that? It's because you want the Doppelganger to use Rapid Slash, and when you're on the left side on the ground with the Yamato, Rapid Slash is right plus attack button. This is why you gotta press right plus attack button when starting Aerial Rave B, so that the Doppelganger can use Rapid Slash. So, right plus attack button, and now you make a pause, and now you just continue mashing. And when Vergil is done with Aerial Rave B, when he's done with the final hit and he's pinned the enemy to the ground, you wait a little, definitely don't be hasty, and now, okay? Now what you want to do is, you want to press left and you want to hold the attack button, and then switch to the Mirage Edge and press right plus attack button almost immediately. Alright, so why is that? It's because you want the Doppelganger to use Rising Star. When you are on the right side, on the ground with the Yamato, Rising Star is left plus holding the attack button. So, you press left and you hold the attack button, and the Doppelganger will use Rising Star to launch the enemy into the air. However, immediately after inputting Rising Star, which is left plus holding the attack button, you switch to the Mirage Edge, and you press right plus attack button to use Air Stinger with Vergil. So, the Doppelganger uses Rising Star, Vergil uses Air Stinger. And now, you want the Doppelganger to use Aerial Rave B. So now the Doppelganger is doing Aerial Rave B, not Vergil. So after Air Stinger, you use Helmbreaker, but you press the attack button twice so that the Doppelganger can do the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. So Helmbreaker, and you press the attack button twice while using it, and then you make a pause, which is required for Aerial Rave B, and now you use Stinger, which is left plus attack button, but while using Stinger, you mash the attack button about 4 to 5 times so that the Doppelganger can do the rest of Aerial Rave B. If you don't mash fast enough or hard enough, the Doppelganger won't use the last hit of Aerial Rave B. So make sure that while using Stinger, you are mashing, okay? Because, Aerial Rave B is attack button, pause, and then you mash the attack button like a maniac. So while using Helmbreaker, you press the attack button twice, you make a pause before Stinger, and then you use Stinger, and while using it, you mash like a maniac. So now that Vergil is done with Stinger, and the Doppelganger is done with Aerial Rave B, you switch to the Yamato, and you use Void Slash, which is back plus forward plus attack button, and you deactivate the Doppelganger. Before I start talking about the second setup, I think I need to talk about Vergil's air taunts once again. What I'm about to say applies to most of my newer combos, so basically, you know how Vergil has an air taunt, right? Like, he throws these 3 mini summon swords at the enemy, and they launch the enemy into the air, essentially. Yeah, so that's his default air taunt. So when you press the taunt button in the air, that's what he'll do. However, this only works if your style rank is below S. So if it's A, B, C, or D, or no rank, you will get this air taunt. However, if your style ranking is S, or double S, or triple S, instead of this air taunt, where he throws these miniature summon swords, he will do this. So this DMC3 air rave, essentially. But this only works if your style ranking is S or higher, right? So double S, triple S. And it only works if you have the Yamato equipped or if you have the Mirage Edge equipped. So even if your style ranking is S or higher, if you have Beowulf equipped, you will be able to use the normal air taunt with the summon swords. So if you want to use the S rank air taunt in your combo, which is the case with, like the Amethyst combo, the Nocturnal combo, the Rose combo, all these combos. So if you want to use the S rank air taunt, what I recommend for this combo, before you even start this combo, if you have SS Sion's Collaborative Trainer, which I assume that if you're watching this video and if you're trying DMC combos, you have this trainer, go into Taunt Selector, go to Vergil, and replace both his air taunt and his S rank air taunt with Yamato Air Rave. Right? That's what you want. This will make it so that even if your style ranking is not S, you can use this air taunt, like, the S rank air taunt. Also, you know how even if your style ranking is S, if you have Beowulf equipped, Vergil will use the normal air taunt, with the summon swords. Well, this facilitates things, right? Because if you go into Taunt Selector, you can use the S rank air taunt even with Beowulf equipped, which is what I did in both the Rose combo and the Nocturnal combo. And the Amethyst combo, actually. So in all of these combos, I am using the S rank air taunt, even though I have Beowulf equipped, which shouldn't be possible. You could even say that this is kind of like cheating, but it facilitates things, because this way, you don't have to switch to the Mirage Edge or the Yamato just so you could use this one taunt, right? It definitely facilitates things, and that's what I recommend using. Another option, and I didn't even know this was a thing up until recently, is you have the option to enable always S rank air taunts. So this will make it so that you always have this S rank air taunt available. However, if you have Beowulf equipped, you're gonna have the normal air taunt. But this facilitates things. My go-to method is to use the taunt selector and replace both the air taunt and the S rank air taunt with Yamato Air Rave. Now that Vergil has caught the enemy with Void Slash, you immediately switch to the Mirage Edge, and you immediately summon the Haze Doppelganger again, alright? So immediately after deactivating him, you summon him again. And, once again, before he is fully formed, while the Doppelganger is still a blur, you use Drive with the Mirage Edge, which is back plus forward plus attack button. This will cause Vergil to launch the enemy into the air using Drive. And the Doppelganger won't do anything because he's only been formed now. So now that you're done with Drive, you're obviously locked on throughout this whole thing. So you lock on and you press the trig button to use Air Trick. However, here's the thing. When you use Air Trick to teleport towards the enemy, the Doppelganger teleports with you. He follows you, basically, when you use Air Trick. So, how do you fix that? It's very simple. You do the same thing we did during the Tetsuzanko combo, the Infernal combo, the Apex combo. What you want to do is, you want to use Air Trick, like you input lock on plus trig button, and then you immediately call the Doppelganger back to your position, in my case by pressing V, and this will prevent the Doppelganger from following you and teleporting alongside you, and he will stay put. So, like I said, use Drive, and now you immediately use Air Trick, and you immediately call the Doppelganger back to your position, okay? This will stop the Doppelganger from doing anything. At this point, the moment you're next to the enemy, you use the S-Rank Air Taunt, alright? During this S-Rank Air Taunt, Vergil does not respond to melee commands, but the Doppelganger does, alright? So, during this S-Rank Air Taunt, while Vergil is taunting, you input Void Slash, which is left plus right plus attack button. And since the Doppelganger is on the left side, on the ground with the Yamato, because, when you're on the left side on the ground with the Yamato, and you press left plus right plus attack button, that is Void Slash. So, the Doppelganger is obviously on the left side on the ground, he can only use the Yamato. When you press left plus right plus attack button, the Doppelganger uses Void Slash. However, what happens here is Vergil uses Helmbreaker. Now, why is that? Even though Vergil doesn't react to melee commands, by the time you press the attack button, he will kind of wake up and he will react to you pressing the attack button once, alright? So, when you press the attack button once in the air with the Mirage Edge, that is Helmbreaker. However, you want to enemy step this Helmbreaker, so you want to jump cancel it. So you press the attack button and then you jump so that Vergil doesn't do the whole thing. So basically, let's go over this again one more time. So Drive, and then you use Air Trick and you immediately call the Doppelganger back to your position. You use the S-Rank Air Taunt. You press left plus right plus attack button. Then you jump. And then you press right plus attack button so that Vergil can use Air Stinger. So basically, Vergil pins the enemy to the ground with Helmbreaker, and the Doppelganger catches the enemy with Void Slash. Beautiful stuff, really. So, very simple. Left plus right plus attack button so that the Doppelganger can use Void Slash, and that Vergil can use Helmbreaker, and immediately jump so that you cancel the Helmbreaker, right? After using Air Stinger, you once again, you use Helmbreaker and you deactivate the Doppelganger. Now you can go into your Sin DT, you switch to the Yamato, and you use Rising Star. Now you wait a little, you switch to Beowulf, and you use Starfall. And the moment you hit the ground with Starfall, you switch to the Mirage Edge, and you use Overdrive. That concludes the second setup. Now let's talk about the third setup. Now, before I actually analyze this setup, I think I need to approach this differently. I think this setup deserves the same treatment as Cat's setup in my Storm combo, basically. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to analyze all of the moves in this setup, then I'm going to analyze the idea behind the setup, and then I'm going to analyze the whole thing in its entirety. However, one thing that I really need to say before I start any of this is that this setup is hell. Not because it's hard to pull off. In terms of inputs, it's really not that difficult. You'll get it down. That is not a problem at all. But if there is one thing I hate about combos, it is that sometimes you will encounter setups like this. Setups that are almost pure RNG. They're random. And there is a 90% or 95% chance of failure. And you have no idea, absolutely no idea how to do it and how to correct it and what to circumvent and how to circumvent it. I had a lengthy talk with Levy, who was the creator of the setup, and even he was like, oh yeah, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, and then after trying every variable, he was like, okay man, I don't know what you're doing wrong, honestly. It looked fine here, like it should have worked. Even Cad was puzzled, he was perplexed, he was like, I think this setup is just incredibly inconsistent. It's not worth it, it's not reliable. And there is a reason for it. Whether or not this setup will work depends solely on one thing, and that one thing is Vergil's position before overdrive, or rather, the distance between Vergil and the enemy's altitude, or basically how far they are from the ground, or how close they are to the ground, you know what I mean? But I think that more so than the altitude, the distance between Vergil and the enemy is really the key factor here. I will explain more about this later, I'll elaborate, but for now, let's talk about all the moves that this setup is comprised of. So number one, we've got overdrive. You already know, back plus forward plus attack button, then you press the attack button one more time, and then you can hold it and charge it up to 3 times. As is the case with, well, almost, like we had the Ice combo, the Torment combo, the Overdrive / Divine combo. In all of these combos, you gotta charge the Mirage Edge, you gotta charge Overdrive 3 times. And it's the same with this combo. Alright, so we already know what overdrive is. I also use the heavy rain blades in this setup. That is S plus W plus right mouse button in my case, or well, back plus forward plus mirage blade button. The heavy rain blades keep the enemy frozen in time and space for about roughly 5 seconds, and then they will eventually get unfrozen. So that's the heavy rain blades. What about roundtrip though? Roundtrip is when you have the Mirage Edge equipped and you press and hold the attack button for a very long time, like a second and a half, and then when it starts glowing, you release it, and Vergil will release this circular sword that will cut up the enemy. However, as was the case with the Storm combo, with the Helix combo, you want the reverse roundtrip. And how do you do that? So if you're on the left side, on the ground, the way you do this reverse roundtrip is you press and hold the attack button with the Mirage Edge, right? And when it starts glowing, you let go of the lock-on, you press and hold left, and you release the attack button. This will cause Vergil to throw roundtrip in the other direction, away from the enemy. So, once again, you just press and hold the attack button, you let go of the lock-on, you press and hold left, and then you release the attack button. However, in this case, we want to do this after overdrive. We want to immediately use this reverse roundtrip after releasing overdrive. And how does that work? It's incredibly simple. So after the third charge of overdrive, you release the attack button only to immediately start holding it again. So you let go of it and then you immediately press and hold it again. You let go of the lock-on and you press and hold left and you release the attack button. That is how you do this reverse roundtrip in this combo. So after the third charge of overdrive, you release the attack button only to immediately press it and hold it. And I swear you gotta be immediate. You gotta do it immediately. You gotta be incredibly fast. And then, same principle, you let go of the lock-on, you press and hold left, and you release the attack button. Alright? That's how it works. So that is the reverse roundtrip. What else do you have in this combo? You got the spiral blades. Now, the spiral blades, the way you do them is you press and hold the Mirage Blade button. In my case, my Mirage Blade button is the right mouse button. So I press it and hold it, and what happens is this one Mirage Blade embeds itself into the enemy. If the enemy is airborne, this can prevent them from falling to the ground. It can prevent them from losing altitude, and this is not exclusive to Spiral Blades. This is something that happens with every attack with the Mirage Blades, be it Spiral Blades, Storm Blades, Blistering Blades, Heavy Rain Blades. Every attack with the Mirage Blades automatically embeds one Mirage Blade into the enemy before the actual attack, and this one Mirage Blade can prevent the enemy from falling to the ground if they are close to it or if they are airborne. So Spiral Blades, in this case, you just press and hold the Mirage Blade button, and these Spiral Blades will appear around Vergil, and they'll just spin like this. And if you press and hold the Mirage Blade button again, so you press it and hold it for a long time, the Mirage Blades, the Spiral Blades, will stop spinning. It'll look like this. And when you release the Mirage Blade button, the Spiral Blades will scatter, hitting everything around Vergil. Alright? So that is how Spiral Blades work. You just press and hold the Mirage Blade button, they appear, and they start spinning. You press and hold the Mirage Blade button again, they stop spinning. You release the Mirage Blade button, they scatter. That is all. As you already know, this needs no introduction. Rapid Slash with the Yamato is just right plus attack button when you are on the left side on the ground. Now, in SynDT, you can use Void Slash immediately after using Rapid Slash, but that is only in SynDT. You cannot use this in base form. If you try to use Void Slash after Rapid Slash in base form, it won't work, because Vergil does not react to melee commands while he is sheathing his sword after Rapid Slash in base form. But in SynDT, that limitation is not a thing. So you can immediately use Rapid Slash and follow it up with Void Slash, which is back plus forward plus attack button. While we're at it, let's talk about Void Slash. Void Slash is back plus forward plus attack button, and Vergil catches the enemy like this. However, when Vergil is done sheathing his sword, this Void Slash explosion happens, and it pulls the enemy into Vergil. Now, just like before, just like with the overdrive combo, just like with the storm combo, I need to talk about the Void Slash glitch. And I'm just going to be quoting myself verbatim here. You guys probably remember the overdrive combo. I've renamed it to Divine combo. In that combo, I make use of the Void Slash glitch. The way Void Slash works, as you guys already know, is you press back plus forward plus attack button, Vergil catches the enemy with the slash, and when he sheathes his sword, this explosion will kind of damage the enemy, right? So it's not just a Void Slash that can damage and catch enemies and prevent them from falling to the ground, it's also the Void Slash explosion. Think overdrive combo, think void combo, eclipse combo, infernal combo. In all of these combos, we have instances where it's not the Void Slash that prevents the enemy from falling to the ground, it's the Void Slash explosion that prevents the enemy from falling to the ground. So, what is the Void Slash glitch? This is a glitch that happens when you use the Void Slash, and immediately after using it, you cancel it, preferably with trig down, and you use a taunt, preferably the lock-on taunt. What's going to happen is Vergil will cancel Void Slash with trig down and immediately use a taunt. The Void Slash will keep the enemy airborne, but then it will disappear. And then, about 2 seconds later, the Void Slash explosion will appear and it will catch the enemy. Usually you want to use the Storm Blades. Like, look at how I did it in the Overdrive / Divine combo. Like, I cancel it, I use Storm Blades, I use the lock-on taunt. The enemy falls and is actually intercepted by this Phantom Slash. Some people are calling this the Phantom Slash. Most commonly, it's known as the Void Slash Explosion Glitch, or just Void Slash Glitch. But if you think Phantom Slash sounds cooler, sure. However, this is not the only way to trigger this glitch. There is another way. See, instead of canceling Void Slash by using trig down and using the lock-on taunt, you can simply use the Void Slash and immediately cancel it by switching to Beowulf and using Hell on Earth. it will have the same exact effect, completely identical. So there are two ways to trigger this void/explosion glitch, the phantom slash, alright? So I've analyzed every part of the setup, I've analyzed overdrive, I've analyzed the reverse round trip, I've analyzed the spiral blades, and now the void/explosion glitch, and of course you end this combo with Hell on Earth. But now let's talk about the idea behind this setup. So what is the idea behind this setup? It's very simple. Vergil releases overdrive, the enemy falls, and they get caught by the overdrive beam. So they're prevented from falling to the ground by this overdrive beam. Then Vergil does the reverse round trip and he throws it away. And he does a spiral blade simultaneously. He uses rapid slash to cut through the enemy, and he uses void slash, and he immediately cancels it with Hell on Earth, triggering the void/explosion glitch that will occur later. And now he makes sure that the spiral blade stops spinning. Alright? This is the part of the combo where it all comes together. And there are 4 layers here. I want you to pay very close attention to that. What do you see? Do you see these 4 parts of the combo? They all interact with one another to create this perfection, basically. So, the first thing you see, this is like the farthest thing from Vergil, is the reverse round trip, right? That's the reverse round trip that Vergil threw earlier. Then we have the overdrive beam that Vergil activated earlier, alright? Then we've got the void slash, which is soon gonna turn into the void/explosion, and then we got the spiral blades, alright? So how do these moves interact with one another? It's incredibly simple. The first thing that happens is the overdrive beam explodes and it sends the enemy flying towards Vergil, right? The moment the enemy is sent flying towards Vergil, they're about to fall, right? They're about to fall to the ground. But now Vergil releases the spiral blades and they scatter, blowing the enemy away from Vergil. And now the enemy is about to fall again, but the void/explosion, the phantom slash, activates, and it prevents the enemy from falling to the ground. And then the reverse round trip comes back like a boomerang, and it slices through the enemy, further preventing them from falling to the ground. And now Vergil does Hell on Earth, and he destroys everything. This is cinema. Absolute cinema. Peak fiction. This is so cool. I cannot get over how fucking cool this is, man. Like, the fact that you have all these moves interacting with one another like this, it is like 800 IQ stuff, man. Like, the fact that the first thing that happens, like I said, is the overdrive beam explodes, the enemy is sent flying. And now the spiral blades send the enemy flying towards the void/explosion that prevents them from falling, and then the reverse round trip grazes them, and it additionally prevents them from falling. This is basically the idea behind the combo, and it is the coolest thing ever, man. I personally didn't think Cat's setup could be topped, but this might just be it, man. It is crazy good. It is crazy good. So now let's analyze the inputs. So, a few words of advice, but I personally think this is completely irrelevant. I think that what you want is to wait a little after using Rising Star before using Starfall for the enemy to lose like 1 millimeter of altitude. Completely optional, by the way. None of this is relevant. You'll probably fail regardless. So, immediately after hitting the ground with Starfall, you immediately use Overdrive, and you input the Heavy Rain Blades before, like, just as Vergil's first beam of Overdrive is about to get charged. Like, the first glow, before that first glow happens, at that point, you want to input the Heavy Rain Blades. So, back plus forward plus attack button, and you can mash the attack button, and now you hold it, and you want to charge Overdrive 3 times while the enemy is frozen by the Heavy Rain Blades. And you keep charging it, you keep holding the attack button, and now, when you hear the enemy growling, Alright? So when the enemy gets frozen by the heavy rain blades, they'll stay frozen for approximately 5 seconds, I think, maybe more, I don't really know. And when they get unfrozen, they will start growling, at least if it's the Helcana.
It's over. It's over. It's over.
So when you hear this growl, that's your indicator to release the attack button, right? Usually, not always. And the moment you release the attack button, right? Like half a second later, you also want to do the following. So you charge overdrive 3 times, and when you hear that the enemy has been unfrozen by the heavy rain blades, at that point, right, you release the attack button to release overdrive, you release the lock-on, and you immediately press the attack button again to hold it, right? And now you also hold the Mirage Blade button so that you can do the Spiral Blades, right? And you keep holding the attack button, and now you press the left and you let go of the attack button so that Vergil can use the reverse round trip. So let's ignore the Spiral Blades entirely. Like I said, when you charge the overdrive beam 3 times, you release the attack button only to immediately press it and hold it again, right? And you keep holding it like a maniac. Now you release the lock-on, and at some point you press the left, you hold it, and you release the attack button so that Vergil can use the reverse round trip. But, like I said, the moment you let go of the attack button, and then you press it and hold it again, around that time, you also want to input the Spiral Blades, which is holding the Mirage Blade button, right? And that is basically how this works. Once you're done with the reverse round trip, and once the enemy has been caught by the overdrive beam, you switch to the Yamato, and you use Rapid Slash, only to immediately use Void Slash. And now, you switch to Beowulf to immediately cancel Void Slash and use Hell on Earth, right? You input Hell on Earth. And now, you immediately press and hold the Mirage Blade button again, and you keep holding it so that the Spiral Blades can stop spinning. At this point, the overdrive beam will explode, blowing the enemy towards Vergil, and now you release, right? You release the Spiral Blades. They will scatter, blowing the enemy away, and now the Void Slash explosion will trigger, preventing the enemy from falling, and now the reverse round trip will graze the enemy, and at this point, Vergil will do Hell on Earth. And that is basically the end of the Helix combo. Like I said, what matters here mostly is the timing. Like I said, the moment you release overdrive, you release the attack button, you immediately press it and hold it again. You immediately let go of the lock-on. You immediately input the Spiral Blades by holding the Mirage Blade button. Then you press and hold left, and you release the attack button to use this reverse round trip. That is the only input-intensive part here. The only part where you really gotta be really good with your timing, but it's laughably easy. You just gotta believe me. Also, remember that thing I mentioned with, the Spiral Blades? How the moment you press the right mouse button, or, the Mirage Blade button, one Mirage Blade will embed itself into the enemy before the Spiral Blades appear, and how this is basically how every move with the Mirage Blades works. Yeah, well, the thing about this is actually crucial because your timing here needs to be impeccable, but it's also kind of random. So look at what happens if you don't input the Spiral Blades at all. The enemy simply falls to the ground, and that's it. However, because you have to input the Spiral Blades, one Mirage Blade embeds itself into the enemy, and it causes the enemy to stop falling. It causes them to stop losing altitude for about a fraction of a millisecond. And this fraction of a millisecond is all it takes for the overdrive beam to travel at least 1 millimeter farther, right? And it manages to catch the enemy. So you inputting the Spiral Blades and this one Mirage Blade embedding itself into the enemy causes the enemy, it interrupts them. It interrupts the falling process. and it causes the enemy to stop losing altitude, and it also causes the overdrive beam to catch the enemy. However, your timing here needs to be perfect. I want to say after you hear the enemy growling, you wanna basically release the attack button, like release overdrive, and then just as the enemy is about to hit the ground, or well, like half a second after releasing overdrive, you input the spiral blades. But it's kind of RNG. We'll talk about it. But there are other problems with this setup that we will later talk about. For now, let's talk about all the issues you can encounter and all the mistakes you can make during this combo. So the first mistake you can make, and yes, this is a mistake, undoubtedly, is inputting Rising Star way too early. And as a result, the Doppelganger doesn't react. I am almost embarrassed that I have to talk about this because this happened so many times that I lost count and I didn't even realize it. I didn't even understand why this kept happening because I would keep inputting Rising Star, like left plus holding the attack button, way too early. And I was for some reason convinced this was a camera issue. It is not. You want to wait for Vergil to be completely done with the final hit of Aerial Rave B, and then you're free to input Rising Star, which is left plus holding the attack button. In all these instances, I input Rising Star way too early, and the Doppelganger doesn't do anything as a result. He simply doesn't react. So make sure to wait. Don't be hasty. Sometimes I'll input Rising Star so quickly that the Doppelganger will simply use Rapid Slash, which, you know, Rising Star only works if you're making contact with the enemy. If you can't make contact with the enemy because they're airborne or something, you can't use Rising Star. This was completely on me. Just ignore this, like, entirely. Moving on. Now, sometimes the Doppelganger will use Aerial Rave A instead of B, and this happens if I mash the attack button too much during Helmbreaker. You're supposed to press the attack button twice so that the Doppelganger can do the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B, and then you make a pause before using Stinger, right? But in all of these instances, or well, I think there's only one, honestly, I would press the attack button 3 times or 4 times, and as a result, the Doppelganger will use Aerial Rave A instead of B, because Aerial Rave A is mashing the attack button like a maniac. Now, this is something that might be considered a frequent issue by a lot of people, but I really didn't experience this a lot. So sometimes you'll input Air Stinger way too late, and as a result, Vergil's Doppelganger will use Rising Star to launch the enemy into the air, but since you used Air Stinger way too late, you will send the enemy flying with Air Stinger. You'll blow them away because you used it way too late. You are supposed to input Rising Star, which is left plus holding the attack button, and immediately press right plus attack button to fly over the enemy with Air Stinger. If you're too late in inputting Air Stinger, this happens, and the enemy gets sent flying by Vergil's Air Stinger. So make sure you got perfect timing. You do it almost simultaneously. Left plus holding the attack button, then switch to Mirage Edge, right plus attack button. Very simple stuff. Now, I said how you're supposed to mash the attack button like a maniac during Stinger, right? So that the Doppelganger can use the rest of Aerial Rave B, because Aerial Rave B requires you to mash like a maniac. But here, I only press the attack button about twice during Stinger, and as a result, the Doppelganger didn't use the final hit of Aerial Rave B. So when I use Void Slash, which is back plus forward plus attack button, the Doppelganger reacted, and he did Aerial Cleave. As a result, I was unable to catch the enemy with Void Slash because of the bounce-up effect, the knockback that Aerial Cleave provides, right? So, why does this happen? It's because the enemy is kind of like in front of the Doppelganger is behind the enemy, and if you press forward plus attack button and you're behind the enemy, that is Aerial Cleave. And the Doppelganger here is obviously behind the enemy. When I input Void Slash, that is back plus forward plus attack button, the Doppelganger reacts to that and he uses Aerial Cleave, right? So you gotta make sure to mash the attack button like a maniac during Stinger, and then the Doppelganger will use the final hit of Area Rave B. After this, you can input Void Slash, and the Doppelganger will not use Aerial Cleave at all. So this is just me not mashing fast enough or hard enough during Stinger, basically. Sometimes I'll use Rapid Slash instead of Void Slash, even though I am pressing back plus forward plus attack button. Vergil does Rapid Slash, which is just forward plus attack button. I suspect this could be a camera issue, or it could just be me inputting Void Slash way too early. And Vergil didn't react to the down input. He didn't react to me pressing back, he only reacted to me pressing forward plus attack button because I input Void Slash so fast. So after Stinger, make sure to wait a little and then press back plus forward plus attack button, but don't wait too long. But yeah, this can happen. Now, this is curious. Air Trick is supposed to be able to cancel everything. Every move you have can be canceled by Air Trick. However, I am using Drive here, and I'm clearly locked on, and I'm pressing the trig button. Vergil should have used Air Trick here, but in all these instances, he simply doesn't. He doesn't use Air Trick. And when I call the Doppelganger back to my position instinctively, he just stays there, right? I guess that you can't use Air Trick to cancel Drive this early. So make sure to wait a little after using Drive, and then you use Air Trick. I don't know if that's it, or if Air Trick simply didn't want to work. Maybe the game didn't respond to my commands, but I think that's unlikely. I guess you really can't cancel Drive if you input Air Trick way too early. I think that's the only thing that makes sense here, and this is something that would happen a lot. Here you can see how I waited for the Doppelganger to form fully before using Drive. And as a result, instead of just standing there, he used Void Slash, because the Doppelganger can only use the Yamato, but he copies your commands. When you press back plus forward plus attack button with the Mirage Edge, that is Drive. But with the Yamato, back plus forward plus attack button is Void Slash, so the Doppelganger does Void Slash here. This all happened because I didn't use Drive early enough. I waited too long. I waited for the Doppelganger to fully form. And this is something that, I'm not going to say it's really frequent, but it happened more times than I'm willing to admit, so yeah. Yes, this is one of the most frequent mistakes, or well, issues that you will encounter with this combo. Oh my lord, man. So the Doppelganger does Yamato combo A, or he simply does nothing instead of using Void Slash. This is during the second setup, obviously, when, you gotta input Void Slash during the air taunt. You can see that I'm clearly pressing left plus right plus attack button, which is supposed to be Void Slash when you're on the left side on the ground with the Yamato, but the Doppelganger doesn't react. This is a camera issue, 1,000,000,000%. The game doesn't register the Doppelganger as being on the left side. It registers him as being, I don't know, in front of the enemy or something. I really don't know how to explain it, but this is 1,000,000,000% a camera issue, and it is one of the most frequent issues I've experienced with this combo. It is incredibly annoying, just incredibly annoying. Now, this is kind of curious, and it was also very frequent. So, in this example, you will see how Vergil's Doppelganger does Void Slash when I press left plus right plus attack button, but Vergil doesn't use Helm Breaker. Now, why is that? There is one reason. Basically, like I said, when using this air taunt, Vergil does not react to melee commands, but the Doppelganger does, right? However, the whole point of this is you want Vergil to react to you pressing the attack button so that he can use Helmbreaker, which is just pressing the attack button once in the air with the Mirage Edge. What happened here was I simply input Void Slash way too early. and Vergil didn't react to me pressing the attack button because he was too busy with his taunt. What you want to do is, after using the air taunt, you want to wait a little. You want to wait a little before inputting it, and then you press left plus right plus attack button, right? And this will ensure that Vergil will finally be done with his taunt, and he will react to your inputs. He will react to you pressing the attack button. What happened here was I input Void Slash way too early. Immediately after starting the air taunt, I pressed left plus right plus attack button. The Doppel reacted, but Vergil didn't. I guess another way to fix this would be to simply press the attack button one more time. So if Vergil doesn't react to your commands, make sure to simply press the attack button one more time to use Helmbreaker. Problem solved, right? So that's one method I would recommend for fixing this. Now here you can see how Vergil uses Rising Star, but there's a gap between him and the enemy. And when I use Starfall, I don't even graze the enemy. And as a result, the enemy falls to the ground, and he is too close to Vergil before Vergil does overdrive. This is an almost guaranteed fail, but if you're feeling lucky, you can try and play around with this and experiment. I personally think that this is a guaranteed fail, and you should restart the combo. Now let's talk about the final setup and all the issues you can encounter and all the mistakes you can make with this setup. The first thing can happen is no round trip. So you let go of the attack button to release overdrive, you press and hold the attack button again, you keep holding it, but you release it too early, and there is no round trip. This happened a billion times. Even now it happens, like it tends to happen, because you really gotta hold the attack button for a very long time after overdrive. You gotta hold it like a maniac. Even after you see that the mirage edge has started glowing, keep holding the attack button even longer just for good measure, and then release it. And these are just some of the recorded instances. I don't use round trip because I let go of the attack button too early. I was holding it, but clearly it wasn't long enough. So make sure you hold the attack button for a very long time before releasing it. Sometimes you will use a round trip, but it won't be the reverse round trip. So what happened here in particular is I basically let go of the attack button first, and then I pressed left second. You gotta press and hold left first, and then release the attack button. And obviously you gotta release the lock on. So here, I just got confused, and I released the attack button first, and then I pressed left. You gotta do the opposite. You just press and hold left, and then release the attack button. So yeah. Now this happened a few times. So I let go of the attack button to release overdrive, and then I waited too long before pressing and holding the attack button again. And when I press the attack button again, Vergil does the first hit of Mirage Edge Combo A. In all these instances, the reason this happened was because I waited too long after releasing overdrive to press and hold the attack button. You gotta do it immediately. I know I've said this before, but I gotta say it again. Make sure to immediately press and hold the attack button after releasing overdrive. If you wait, Vergil does the first slash of Mirage Edge Combo A. And now we can finally talk about the main attraction here. The single most frequent issue you will experience with this combo as a whole, and there are actually two, right? Like two issues. I don't know which one is more frequent, but let's say it's like 50-50. This is definitely one of them. So the enemy falls to the ground before being caught by the overdrive beam. Son, bro. So I don't know how to help you with this. This is, like I said, a positioning problem. It has to do with the distance between Vergil and the enemy before Vergil starts overdrive. And it also has to do with the enemy's altitude. But I don't even think the altitude of the enemy is that relevant, because here you can see how I was mashing the Mirage Blade like a maniac, like 50 times, to make sure that the enemy wouldn't fall to the ground way too fast, right? So that they would get caught by the overdrive beam. But that is not a solution. You don't have that privilege, because you can only press the Mirage Blade button once to input the Spiral Blades, right? That does kind of matter, because it prevents the enemy from losing some altitude. But it's not enough. It's ultimately a distance problem, and sometimes you will be way too far away from the enemy to be able to do anything at all. There is a grand total of like 900, okay, I'm lying, but there are a lot of attempts here. These are all different instances, everything you're seeing on the screen right now, and these are just like, this is just 1% of what I recorded. Keep in mind, I don't record most of my failed attempts, and even the ones I do, I like cherry pick only the most attractive looking ones. So this happened a billion times. I've lost count. This happens more often than it doesn't. It is incredibly, incredibly annoying. The enemy simply falls, and there's nothing you can do about it. I have tried every single variable under the sun. Believe me, I have. I tried delaying overdrive. I tried delaying the spiral blades. I tried delaying everything. I even tried using upper slash instead of rising star. Because when you use upper slash, the enemy won't be as high up in the air, so when you use Starfall, you'll be closer to the enemy, right? And that did yield some results, but it was ultimately fruitless, right? Like, it's not something that you can rely on. Nothing is reliable here. Absolutely nothing. You need to find a setup that will put you at the perfect spot for this setup. If Vergil is not perfectly positioned, if he is not at the perfect distance, this will fail. And the enemy will be too far away from Vergil. And when you input this, I don't know, man. I thought maybe it had to do with when you input the heavy rain blades, but it's not. What I do, like I said, like what I will usually do is I will use overdrive as soon as I hit the ground with Starfall, and I will input the heavy rain blades before the first glow of overdrive. And I will let go of the attack button, I will release overdrive after I hear that the enemy has been unfrozen, like after I hear the enemy growling. And at that point, I will also input the spiral blade about half a second later. Sometimes it works, usually it doesn't though. So I don't know if what I'm telling you here is just me making shit up. Maybe it's some placebo effect. I don't know. I really don't. I wish I had an answer to this, but I just don't. And I don't want to confuse you. I don't want to keep telling you, yo, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's, I just can't get this down consistently. This is an inconsistent setup, and I can't recommend it for that reason. Now, naturally, why is this a problem? You might be thinking, so what if the enemy falls to the ground? You just have OCD. Well, yeah, but no, that's not all there is to it. So let's say you're not bothered by the fact that the enemy is on the ground before overdrive. Sure, why not? That's not the problem. The problem is that 90% of the time, if the enemy falls to the ground before overdrive, this happens. They just get sent flying in a completely random direction, and just look at this. It's a mess. The Void Slash Explosion doesn't catch them, the roundtrip doesn't catch them, nothing works. It is a clusterfuck, and it doesn't work at all. So this is what happens 90% of the time if the enemy falls to the ground. However, sometimes it low-key works. For example, here you can see how it would have worked, but the problem here is that I released the spiral blades way too late, and you can barely see the enemy being sent flying, but that's not important right now. What's important here is that the enemy fell to the ground, and yet the combo would have worked. The setup would have worked. And this happened on multiple occasions. However, more often than not, and by more often I mean like 95% of the time, this will not happen. What will happen is the enemy will get sent flying in a completely random direction and everything fails. I wish I could help you, but I just can't. One thing that I did notice, however, and I don't know if you remember this, but during the Eclipse combo and during the Amethyst combo, I talked about how aggravated I was by the Rising Star glitch. Now, Rising Star, if you're close to the enemy, will keep you close to the enemy, but sometimes if you're kind of far away from the enemy and you use Rising Star, there will be a gap between Vergil and the enemy. See? This is why that one issue happened where Starfall didn't graze the enemy, because there was such a gap between Vergil and the enemy after Rising Star that me using Starfall it didn't even graze the enemy, and as a result, the enemy was too close to Vergil before overdrive, right? So, look at the original combo that I recorded, the successful attempt. You'll notice that there is a big gap between Vergil and the enemy after Rising Star. This could have contributed to the fact that Vergil was at the right distance before overdrive. And Cad, the moment he saw my combo, was like, holy shit, and he also noticed the same thing. But I don't know how to help you with this. Not only do I not know how to trigger this intentionally and make sure that Rising Star creates this gap, but I also can't even tell you for certain if this is even relevant. One word of advice though, and I want you to listen to this very carefully. I noticed that I've been experiencing this problem less and less lately, and I think I know why. So, in a lot of these failed attempts where the enemy falls to the ground before they get hit by overdrive, you'll notice that I input the spiral blades almost immediately after letting go of the attack button to release overdrive. So I let go of the attack button and I press it again and I simultaneously input the spiral blades. This is a big problem and this guarantees that this whole setup will fail. What you want to do is delay it. So when you hear that the enemy starts growling, like when you hear that, or if your camera allows you to see it, if you see that the enemy has been unfrozen, right? At that point, you release the attack button, and then you wait a little for the enemy to lose a little bit of altitude and get closer to the ground, and at that point, you input the spiral blades. There needs to be a gap between that period. Like, first, you let go of the attack button to release overdrive the moment you hear the enemy growling, the moment they get unfrozen. And then you wait for the enemy to, lose a little bit of altitude and get closer to the ground, and then you input the spiral blades. And this one mirage blade will embed itself into the enemy, preventing them from losing altitude, but it will do so later, enabling overdrive to travel closer to the enemy. Now, as you can see, this doesn't work all the time. It's not foolproof. But one thing I did notice is that if you want this setup to succeed, at least increase your chances to 60-40, what you want to do is, after using Rising Star, you wait a little for the enemy to lose a little bit of altitude. I don't know, this could be completely optional, like snake oil stuff. But wait a little, then the moment you hit the ground with Starfall, you use overdrive. Before the first glow, you input the heavy rain blades. The moment the enemy gets unfrozen, or you hear the growl, around that time, around that point, is when you release overdrive, you release the attack button, and then you wait a little for the enemy to almost hit the ground, and then you input the spiral blades. You press and hold the Mirage Blade button. That will increase your chances. I just went into the void and I got this right 5 times in a row. I definitely feel that I have a feeling for it now, but it's still incredibly inconsistent. For example, here I did that same exact thing. I waited, but it was completely immaterial and it didn't work. So sometimes you'll just be too far away from the enemy and no amount of delaying the spiral blades will help you. So, yeah. Now remember that issue from before where I basically I press back plus forward plus attack button, but instead of using Void Slash, Vergil uses Rapid Slash. Well, the same thing happens here. After using Rapid Slash, Vergil uses another Rapid Slash, even though I pressed back plus forward plus attack button. And once again, either a camera issue or me inputting Void Slash way too early. This happened on multiple occasions, and I really feel horrible about it. It's like one of the goofiest mistakes you can make. So yeah, watch out for that. Alright, so now we finally have the most frequent issue. The second, I don't know which one is more frequent. The enemy falling to the ground before even being caught by overdrive, or this issue. So in this issue, the overdrive beam explodes. The enemy is caught by the overdrive beam, but when the overdrive beam explodes, the enemy gets left behind. They just fall to the ground. They don't get sent flying. And I personally believe this has to do with how high up on the overdrive beam the enemy really is. And I think this is also a distance issue, but this time, it's not about Vergil being too far away from the enemy. This time, Vergil is too close to the enemy, and when the enemy gets caught by overdrive, they are too high up on the overdrive beam. They're barely even touching it. There's too big of a gap between the enemy and the overdrive beam. This is a clear indicator that this will simply not work, but there have been several instances where it looks like it's going to work perfectly well, but it doesn't. And the overdrive beam explodes, the enemy gets left behind. Man, this has happened a billion times. I've lost count. I really have. I truly have. I think there are over 6 minutes worth of, different examples here. And there are a few more. There are like 10 more minutes. I might include that, but I don't know if we have the time for that. This has happened a billion times, man. And at this point, I don't even know if this has anything to do with the distance, if this has anything to do with the enemy's altitude, because like I said, in some of these examples, it looks like the enemy has been perfectly positioned on the overdrive beam, and everything's going to work out, but it doesn't. Just look at all these examples, man. Just look at this. This is unreal. Imagine getting this far and this happens. And this is basically par for the course for this combo. It's something that you should expect. It is a miracle. Like if this doesn't happen to you, it's a miracle. I was shocked every time this setup worked. And I think I have only done this setup successfully or semi-successfully about 10 times. Do you understand how insane that is? That you can only do this setup correctly 10 times. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe I'm lowballing it, I don't know. But then again, maybe I'm highballing it. Maybe it didn't even happen 10 times. Because, hey, I don't have a lot of recorded instances where I did it correctly. Not gonna lie. So, yeah, this is something that would keep happening, and it would just keep happening, and it would not stop happening. The overdrive beam explodes, the enemy gets left behind. Nothing more to say here, unfortunately. There's really not that much to say. It is very sad that this setup is so inconsistent that there's just no way to know. You can't affect any of this. Or maybe I'm just very incompetent, but I don't think that's the case here. Anyway, you can just gaze at these mistakes, these failed attempts, to your heart's content. I really don't know how to help you with this. If I could, I would, believe me. And I really hate this. I really hate making an analysis video where I'm just as confused as you, the viewer. I can't help you. I can't give you any instructions on how to prevent this, how to fix this, because I genuinely don't know how the fuck I even did this in the first place myself. It really is incredibly aggravating. And my only advice to you is to just keep playing around with the setup, keep playing around with the combo, and I think you're guaranteed to get it down at some point. Like statistically speaking, I don't think it's likely that you will forever only fail, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I'm just gonna stop talking about this right now because it's getting on my nerves. Now, you know how the blistering blades work, right? Blistering blades work by pressing forward and holding the Mirage Blade button, and Vergil will fire these 8 Mirage Blades in rapid succession, right? So, what happens in all these examples? What happens is Vergil does the blistering blades instead of, making sure that the spiral blades stop spinning. Why does this happen? Look at the original analysis. I input Hell on Earth. Hell on Earth is pressing forward plus trig button plus attack button, right? After I've done that, I don't press anything, and I just press the Mirage Blade button, which is my right mouse button, and I hold it. And Vergil makes the spiral blade stop spinning, and then later I release the Mirage Blade button, and the spiral blades scatter, and they send the enemy flying. What's really important here is to note that I pressed forward plus trig button plus attack button to use Hell on Earth, and I released all of those buttons. There's nothing on my keyboard now. And now I just press the Mirage Blade button to use the spiral blades. However, in all of these instances, you will notice that I press forward plus trig button plus attack button to use Hell on Earth, and while still holding forward, I press and hold the Mirage Blade button, or my right mouse button. As a result, instead of making sure that the spiral blades have stopped spinning, Vergil inputs the blistering blades on top of the spiral blades. You know what I mean? So this happened because I was still holding forward while pressing and holding the Mirage Blade button, because I was using Hell on Earth and the game remembered my inputs, right? You gotta make sure to stop holding forward. Like, you use Hell on Earth, you input it, and you let go of all the buttons. Don't press anything. And now you just press the Mirage Blade button to use the spiral blades. You hold it so that they would stop spinning. If you're still holding forward from the Hell on Earth that you input beforehand, and then you press and hold the Mirage Blade button, Vergil will use the blistering blades. This has happened at least 8 times to me. And it is the most annoying thing that can happen. And I think that's something that can only happen to me, honestly. Now, here you can see how I released the spiral blades way too late. And what happened in the end was the enemy got sent flying in a random direction, right? But I don't know if this is even a problem with me releasing the spiral blades too late, or maybe this would have happened either way, even if I'd released them in time. But this is something that happened quite a few times, honestly. So make sure, right? Make sure that after inputting Hell on Earth, like the moment you input Hell on Earth, you input the spiral blades. You press and hold this Mirage Blade button so that they would stop spinning. And then you release them the moment you see that the enemy has been blown away by the overdrive beam. Otherwise, this might happen. You will release the spiral blades way too late, or you start holding it way too late. Now, the following issue, you could call it OCD, but I consider it a problem. So, here I released the spiral blades too late. Not too late, but it was still late. And as a result, you can barely see the enemy being sent flying by the spiral blades into the void/explosion. So notice how in the original combo, let's look at the original combo. Notice how you can see the spiral blades blowing the enemy away. You can see the enemy flying, and then the enemy gets intercepted by the void slash explosion. This is how it's supposed to be. This is what it's supposed to look like. But in all of these examples, one pattern you'll notice is that the spiral blades send the enemy flying, but you barely see it. The void slash explosion intercepts the enemy before they can even be sent flying. And this is because I release the spiral blades way too late. Now, I understand that a lot of people, most sane people, would consider these successful attempts. I personally don't. Chalk it up to OCD, chalk it up to whatever you want. I just cannot accept this. It looks so goofy. As a matter of fact, I had this one attempt that was almost perfect. Man, I wanted to upload that so badly. It was so perfect. But unfortunately, this happened. It wasn't even that jarring, but to me it was, right? And it's because of that I just didn't upload it. However, conversely, believe it or not, and this may have happened a total of 3 times, probably less, sometimes you can release the spiral blades way too early. I don't know how this is possible, honestly, but it's possible, apparently. And as a result, the spiral blades go underneath the enemy, right? Because the enemy is too high up in the air. You gotta wait a little before releasing the spiral blades. You gotta wait for the enemy to almost hit the ground, and then you release the spiral blades. Here, I did it too early, and I have no idea how this happened. This should be impossible in theory. Like, I don't know how I was able to do it this fast, but oh well. Now look at this. This is an anomaly. I really don't know how to explain it. I released the spiral blades in time. They didn't go over the enemy or under the enemy, but look at what happens. The spiral blades scatter, they send the enemy flying, but the void slash explosion doesn't activate early enough. It activates too late, and the enemy gets sent flying and they fall to the ground before they can be caught by the void slash explosion. How? Literally how? Could it be that I released the spiral blades way too early, or I input void slash way too early? Is that what happened here? I swear the void slash explosion glitch, the phantom slash, should have been activated. It should have activated way before this. It should have intercepted the enemy, but it didn't. I only have one recorded instance of this, but I feel like this happened on multiple occasions for some reason. Maybe that's just my imagination, but this is something that can happen. Wow. What you're about to see is pain. It is suffering. Oh my lord, man. Please don't do this. This would have worked perfectly. This was going to be a successful attempt. The enemy was sent flying by the overdrive beam. So what happens here? I use Hell on Earth, and I press and hold the Mirage Blade button so that the spiral blades would stop spinning, right? And the spiral blades stop spinning, what do you know? But then I release the Mirage Blade button to release the spiral blades, and for some reason I press it again, throwing one Mirage Blade at the enemy, preventing them from losing altitude and falling to the ground, and as a result, the spiral blades scatter, but they go underneath the enemy because the enemy didn't lose enough altitude. And the reason the enemy didn't lose enough altitude was because, for whatever godforsaken reason, I decided to throw an additional Mirage Blade at the enemy after releasing spiral blades. Why I did this is up for debate. I think it was an accident. I think my finger slipped, and that's why this happened. Or it was instinct. Or maybe I have Parkinson's. I really couldn't tell you. But this is pain and suffering because this would have been a perfect attempt most likely. So, yeah. These are all anomalies, except for the thing I just talked about. That was a mistake. But let's look at another anomaly. Here, I release the spiral blades in time. Perfectly. But what happens is the spiral blades don't hit the enemy. They just don't make contact with the enemy. I don't know if it's because the enemy was too low and they went over him. It looks like that's what happened. Like, the enemy almost hit the ground and they were too close to the ground, so the spiral blades went over, but they just don't make contact with the enemy. I don't know. Was it that I released it too late or something? It looked as though it should have connected. It really should have, but it didn't. And yeah, I'm at a loss. Like, man. Now this looked almost perfect. However, you will notice that I think the enemy fell to the ground before being intercepted by the void/explosion glitch. So they were on the ground before roundtrip could graze them. Or rather, roundtrip didn't even graze the enemy because they were too close. They were basically on the ground already. So I think this has to do with, I guess, like, I think maybe, yeah, I think I released the Spiral Blades way too late here. I think that's one of those issues again. And as a result, you can see how even before I released the Spiral Blades, the enemy is like literally on the ground. They're lying on the ground. And then they scatter, they get sent flying, the void/explosion glitch connects, but the enemy is already on the ground. And then roundtrip doesn't graze the enemy because, well, the enemy is on the ground. I think this is because I released the Spiral Blades way too late. Once again. Like, the enemy is literally on the ground before the Spiral Blades can hit them. They're on the ground before the void/glitch can hit them. They're on the ground and roundtrip can't graze them, so definitely that issue. And now finally, are you ready to see the biggest anomaly I have ever encountered in the history of combo making? Something that I simply cannot explain to save my life. I don't know what this is, but you know, viewer discretion is advised because this is some paranormal activity shit. This is some really scary stuff. I'm just gonna play this video, all right?
It's over. Good night.
Maybe you didn't catch that, so let's put it in slow motion. I want there to be no mistake. Remember that previous issue where I threw one Mirage Blade at the enemy, and that prevented the enemy from losing altitude and falling to the ground? You can clearly see that after releasing the Spiral Blades, I pressed the Mirage Blade button again. And you can clearly see that this one Mirage Blade embedded itself into the enemy, right? Preventing them from losing altitude. That was a genuine mistake on my part. However, here you can see that I press and hold the Mirage Blade button and I release the Spiral Blades in time, right? I release them before the enemy has hit the ground. I didn't do anything. Yet, the enemy gets intercepted by an invisible, by one of Madara's limbo clones, apparently. Something here prevented the enemy. It was not the void/explosion glitch, because look at this. The void/explosion glitch happens way after this, like a full second after this invisible thing intercepted the enemy. And it wasn't me inputting any Mirage Blades because, look at my mouse, I'm not pressing or holding the Mirage Blade button. And the Spiral Blades didn't scatter yet. This is also one thing that you need to hear. My friend messaged me on WhatsApp at this exact moment when the enemy hit this invisible wall. Is that a coincidence? What if, remember that thing where there was like a Mario competition or something and some particle accelerator thing like impacted the speedrun results? Something like that? What if that's what happened here? What if this is some like sign from the universe? Like the universe making sure that I don't do this combo perfectly. I really don't know how to explain this. Like I said, this is not the Spiral Blades. I did not input an additional Mirage Blade, and you can see that. Nothing is being embedded into the enemy, and I'm not pressing anything. And it couldn't have been the void/explosion glitch, because that happens 1 second after this. And it wasn't the Spiral Blades either. This is some collision problem. some invisible wall, something that the enemy hid. But what's so scary about this is that at this exact moment, this microsecond, it was at this exact moment that I received a message from my friend on WhatsApp. How do you explain this? What happened here? Is it the Spiral Blades hitbox? Like, I released the Spiral Blades, but they weren't released just yet. Look at this. What is this? I have no explanation whatsoever. I am terrified right now. Oh, and finally, you already know, just like with the Storm combo and every other combo, air trick instead of Hell on Earth. So, air trick is you press lock on plus trig button, or in my case, shift plus E. However, Hell on Earth is you lock on, of course, and you press forward plus trig button plus attack button, or in my case, W plus E plus left mouse button. In all of these examples, you can clearly see me pressing forward plus trig button plus attack button at the same time, but instead of using Hell on Earth, Vergil does air trick, and this is an issue that has followed me throughout my life. It will never stop, ever. I don't know if it's a camera issue. I'm pretty sure it is. It's 1,000,000,000% the camera. It could be me inputting things too early, too late. I don't know. I really don't. But this is something that will just keep happening and keep happening. And imagine getting to the end of this impossible setup, only for this to happen. So yeah, I don't know what else to say, man. I think I'm gonna end the analysis here. I can leave you with a few of these successful attempts where, for example, here you can see how the combo kind of worked, or well, the setup kind of worked, kind of. But, yeah, I really don't know what more to say here. I'm at a complete loss, and I really hate not being able to properly, concretely explain to you people how to fix, how to avoid these problems, how to avoid these issues, because the truth of the matter is, I myself don't know how to deal with this. And this is an incredibly cool, yet incredibly inconsistent setup that, like, there's like a 5% chance that it might work. But if you play around with it, and if you have the right positioning, the right distance, altitude, all that, it might just work. I think, statistically speaking, it's very likely that it will at some point. So yeah, that's about it. See ya, peace out, and have an amazing day.